GMAT. I'm back with another very interesting session with you guys. I have a very special guest today. So her name is Rohini, and she has a very interesting story because her GMAT story consists of two stories within a single story. So a lot of students they improve from XX score to let's say 710 or 720, but Rohini improved twice within a span of a few months, which is what makes her really special. So let's welcome Rohini to the session. And Rohini, quick introduction to yourself. Thank you for joining us today.
I can't hear you at all. I'm so sorry. I
It's absolutely fine. We just wanted a brief introduction of you. That's all. So just introduce yourself.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Is it echoing? Is the voice echoing for you now?
Just a little bit. Yeah, it's fine. It's
Uh,
fine. Carry on.
can we? Yeah. Then if we can do with this, I'd be so much happier. Yeah.
Go ahead. So just introduce yourself. We'd love to know a little bit more about you. Just a brief introduction would do.
Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Rohini, and I actually have almost 8 years of work experience in one of India's biggest private oil and gas companies. I'm also a mother of a 2-year-old boy, and yeah, I recently took my GMAT, which was in Feb actually, and I got a 750 as the banner says. Yes, so that's just an introduction from my end.
I have two questions for you. First is, have you gotten vaccinated? And second, what's the name of your boy?
Okay, so no, I haven't gotten vaccinated yet. I haven't managed to get a slot, and I have some family commitments, and we're just trying to, kind of schedule everything in. And my son's name is Ashwat.
That's a really nice name. Even I haven't gotten the vaccination, by the way. It makes it a little scary with me. So let's get into the presentation immediately, and
Right.
I hope the session is helpful for all of you. So the first thing that I really want to talk about is your journey, right? So your first part of the journey is breaking 700. That was a big itself. Let's be very honest about that. And the biggest challenge for you was, like you mentioned, is you hadn't studied in 8 years. So question is, how did you kind of allocate time for studying? And then how did you allocate time for really revising those studies?
Right. So, yeah, well, of course, I hadn't been in touch with studying for, like you said, 8 years. And it's a big deal because, the GMAT requires some really dedicated studying. You can't just do away with a little here and there. So, of course, the one thing that really matters is how much you want this, especially when you're at my stage, right? I mean, I had a lot of reasons for getting this MBA, and I just wanted it so bad that it's about just wanting, because it's about, you'll always figure out the hows if you know the whys. It's kind of like that, right? So my why was really strong, which is why the how just kind of worked out in spite of me having a full-time job, and in spite of the fact that I am a mother to a 1.5-year-old back then. Now he's 2, but back then he was about a year and a half.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it was difficult for me, but waking up earlier, sleeping later, all that jazz just had to kind of figure into the whole thing, right?
Right. So, quick
And
question. How did you
yeah,
kind of divide your day when it comes to studies, work, and personal stuff?
right. So the first thing was just waking up earlier. My whole preparation started at the time of the lockdown, and at the time of the lockdown everybody got a little laid back. It was the first time that so many of us were working from home, like something that I'd never imagined that could even be possible. But of course that also gotten we got a little lazy, and like with waking up a little later than usual. So actually, there were a couple of factors that worked in my favor, which is one, the lockdown, because then I didn't have to really wake up, at 4 a.m. I could still wake up at 6 a.m. every day. I wouldn't have to really get dressed to go to work, so that the commute and the dressing and all of that really helped me not having to take time out for that. Of course, that was about an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning, because that's when I'm most fresh. I'm a morning person. Um, of course, as the day goes by, it's just too much. I have a 9 to 5 kind of job, and sometimes it does spill over. I have to be honest that I have a good work life balance, so the spillover used to not be very often. And another thing that really worked in my favor was a very robust family support. So that's why I don't want parents who are probably watching this and feeling really guilty about not being able to do this. I had a lot of help, and that really worked in my favor. My family was all, looking after my son while I was studying. So post work, then I used to take about an hour or hour and a half, depending on how I felt. But the one thing was that, yeah, this was how it worked on the weekdays mostly, and of course on the weekends the study hours were much longer, something in the range of maybe 5 to 6 hours, sometimes maybe even 6 to 7 hours. But yeah, that's kind of like the schedule that I followed.
I have an interesting question. So, what if your kid is crying, and what if you're getting a call from work and you were studying? How did you manage to compartmentalize?
Uh, so of course, in all of this, there's always an urgency matrix that one just tends to make up in their head. If my kid is crying because he's just throwing a tantrum, well, I just let it be, because I know that he's being taken care of. If I know that the call from work is not really important, you just know, you've been there, you've been in the 9 hours, you know what's happened, what's transpired. But of course, taking a work call is always important, just to know why the other person is calling. But it's just about making the urgency matrix. There were days, I mean, I studied for this test with both my attempts on a total of about 5 months. Of course, there were days when I couldn't study in between because of work. So you just have to make an urgency matrix. You have to decide that sometimes work has to take a precedence, and that's okay. I guess 5 months, it's bound to happen sometimes. So I guess you just have to be open to it. Yeah,
Right. So you basically made sure that you made a slot of study in the morning, and then you reinforced that with a slot in the evening. And weekends,
right.
it was a little more expanded. Got it. So the second part is obviously carving out time to study. Like you said, you need the right support system in place to really get
Yeah.
this done. That's what you did. Um, the last part, how did you make sure that you were consistent in your studies?
Right. So I guess how it works for me, and I guess how it works for a lot of people, if you want to be consistent at something, again, you just need to want it, because the moment you start looking for excuses to not do something, you just clearly don't want it enough. But because, I come from an industry with a changing landscape, I'm at a time in my career where I could see that if I don't get an MBA now, uh, it would be never for me, because my kid is only going to get older, my responsibility is only going to increase, and then it's never going to happen. So that, just the end goal in mind really ensured consistency. Of course, with all factors working for me in terms of the family support and all of that, of course. But it's that desire to really, really get that score and to really make it, that just, I didn't really use anything else, honestly. It was just that one thing that I've got to do this, and that's how I woke up every single day. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that killer motive does it for you. So, but I think there are three things that would have been key parts of your daily plan. So you would have set milestones for yourself. This is what I
Right.
wanted. You would have made sure that you took a review of this every 3 days to see, have I done this? Can I do it better? And eventually you would have obviously were working with us, so you probably asked us, how am I doing? Or you asked a friend of yours or a mentor on how things can be improved. So I think staying consistent is pretty much 80% of the battle, and making sure
Right.
that you're motivated kind of really gets you there. Now, I think
Right.
this is what we do with a lot of students. We get them to create these personalized plans. And guys, please go ahead, don't call with one of our mentors. Objective feedback is very, very important. Let's go back into conversation with you again, right? So tell me something, or take me through your first half of the journey. This is getting to 7 months.
Right. So, like I said, I started studying sometime in the beginning of September, and I just kind of eased into the course. I let the course do the deciding for me, in terms of what I do when I just followed it to the T. Um, I took about somewhere between a month and a half to about 2 months to finish the course entirely, in terms of the quant and the verbal and all of that. And I was, like I said, I just let the course guide me. So I did each and everything, including the applications, the concept files, the practice files, and all of that. And once I was done, again, one thing that I've told EGMAT before as well is that in my first attempt, I was a little skeptical about using Scholaranium. I had some misgivings about it in my head, which I believe, maybe shouldn't have. I was prejudiced, or I just had some misgivings about it. I didn't land up using it. And because I didn't have that resource, I had that many lesser questions, which is why I had to then turn to the OG as my next step for, like, what do I do after I'm done with the course, right? I mean, the max that somebody can do is probably go on GMAT Club, get a few questions. But then again, I guess we all understand that GMAT Club, there is no real, filter on the quality of the questions. So one can get a little carried away in terms of the difficulty, or just the precision of the question sometimes is not good enough. But then I had to resort to that. So I did a lot of GMAT Club questions. I did the OG. Of course, I bought a lot of the official questions. So I invested, a little. I invested money in that because I felt that that's a good investment, because at least the questions are more crisp, they're precise, they're like the ones that I would see on the test. So that's kind of how, that's the kind of level of revision that I did before I started to feel that now I can face my first mock, right? So then again, I didn't take the Scholaranium, I didn't take the Sigma Mock X. I was just like, all right, now EGMAT is done for me, right? I've just finished the course and that's it. So I started taking my mocks. Now, the my first attempt at the first mock that I took, practice one, I got a 730. Now, of course, that's a very happy moment, because you feel like, oh my god, okay, so you have a chance of, like, getting a good score. But that's where I felt the whole game changed for me, because there were a couple of factors that really went wrong. The first factor was that I kept consistently getting anywhere between a 700 to a 740. So this was my range in the mock tests. I took a total of 5 official mocks. For some reason, I left that one official mock behind. Maybe I just knew that I'm going to need it. I don't know. It's just an intuition, right? So I left that one mock. I took the 5 mocks, and my scores fluctuated anywhere from 700 to 740. Um, my quant scores were pretty rock solid around a Q49 or a Q50. I never managed to get the 51 somehow. And I just made my peace with it, that that's okay. But the verbal really fluctuated. Uh, but then again, the reason that I didn't, really pay attention to these things in the first attempt was because my scores were decent, like, like a 700 to 740, um, you know, like verbal, not because of there's no statistics involved in the evaluation of the official mocks. All you get is a score at the end of the day, and at max, you can actually look at what questions you got wrong, but there is no way to check how long you took for a question, or what type of questions you're getting incorrect. And another thing is, you start to feel that you're probably decent at something because you start doing things wrong and you get easier questions. So for instance, if I start off on a slightly rocky note, I start getting easier questions, so I just do them right and I feel that I'm getting them right. So what is the issue? Like, you're just not able to understand what the issue is. And that's exactly where
It's all
I
intuition
was.
based.
Exactly. So that's kind of where I was when I went in for my first attempt. And it was more of, just let it be. I mean, leave it to the test day kind of feeling. Like, if I get it, I get it, and if I don't, we'll see about it. And I guess if you, yeah, well, that's the thing. Like if you have that feeling, you will probably just land up, not getting the score that is your target score. So that's kind of where I was at the first attempt. Yeah, when I got that 710.
So let's get back into the people and quickly discuss what you've said. Is essentially what you've said that um,
Um, Hello.
hello, yeah,
Yes.
I think I'm back on. This on learning. So I'm going to study books. I'm going to study the concepts, and I'm just going to focus on just learning as much, which is what you did, and you did it right. And then there's the other piece where I'm going to just practice, 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 and just make sure that I get better after practicing as much as I do.
Right. So I
So,
kind of miss, yeah, go ahead.
no, carry on, please.
No, because I actually missed, there was a connection issue at your end, so I didn't get your entire question. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. So, what I'm basically saying is that um, some students practice and some students just focus on learning. So, what worked with you when you were focused on just learning?
Uh, I focused on just learning. No, again, like I missed you there, but I
Okay, let's just get back to the PPT because the PPT has most of the information there.
sure. I'm
Let's
sorry.
just That's okay. That's fine. So essentially, there's just a few ways that you may want to improve, right? So the first is you improve your ability by learning concepts, which is what you did. You focused on OG,
Yeah,
you focused on the core concepts. There's certain students who just practice a lot. So you improve your ability, YY points for that. But at a
right,
certain point, you're going to come and reach a plateau that, I've studied everything, practiced thousands. What do I do? The
right,
final bridge that really gets you from where you are, wherever you may be, to that
right.
score that you want to go to is really asking the question why, strategically reviewing and revising all of these things that you've done together. So I wanted to
Yeah.
talk to you more about that. Take me through what you did differently
What
after
I
your
did
first
differently. Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. And I think the slide is my story because, yes, it's very true that the concepts and the applications get you to a certain ability level. And sometimes, just doing questions makes you feel, gives you this false, it makes you feel like you're making good use of your time. It makes you feel that, okay, if not this time, next time you'll get better. Just do more because the next question will be all right. A lot of us go through this. I've spoken to a lot of people who've taken the test, and I guess it's a common sentiment amongst people that this is how most people feel, because the second part is very it takes a lot of effort to actually do that strategic review. So a lot of people probably they feel that it's not meant for them, but then that's the kind of trap that happens. So what actually really changed for me in my second attempt was exactly the strategic review. So when I got my first attempt score, and I, of course, that was not my target score, but I also knew coming back from the test center that I didn't know what to do to get to my target score. And I just resigned myself to the fact that I needed help. And who better than EGMAT, because I've been working with them. And I saw a lot of your videos also where people have reached out to you and they've been successful. So I thought, like, what do I have to lose? And it doesn't even cost me anything extra, honestly, to like really reach out, which is great. I mean, it's a free additional service that you get essentially. So I reached out to EGMAT and I was assigned a mentor, Archit Bhargav. And I also, of course, I got the ESR for my first test. and that's my first look at data analytics, right? So before that, everything was just a number. It was just about what your score is, what you get right, what you get wrong, nothing else. It was the ESR, first time looking at what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, how much time am I taking per question, what kind of fatigue is building into my test while I'm going through it. I mean, it's quite something. It's quite a cool tool actually. And then of course, when I reached out to Archit, he was surprised. He was surprised at the underutilization of the Scholaranium, because he's like, look, you had to pay so much for the ESR. We give it to you every single time you take the Sigma Mock X. So yeah, I mean, yeah, big miss on my part. I should have, whatever. So the past in the past. And Archit guided me through. Clearly, quant was not an issue, because even in my first attempt, I had gotten a Q50. So I guess he just asked me to stay consistent with my practice with quant. It was clearly verbal that was a problem, and in my case specifically, my SC and my RC were pretty bad. So and I didn't even know it, which is the worst part. Like, I'd spent almost 3.5 to 4 months, and I didn't even know that I was that bad at it, which is sad. But yeah, that's when I started really focusing on these things. SC was about getting back to the absolute basic, because my ESR told me that even like my grammar is pretty bad. So I had to get back to the absolute basic. And that's actually also very surprising. I'd like to point out that when I used to do the OGs, I was doing them pretty well. I don't know how, but yeah, I didn't mark the answers for the right reason. I knew it back then. But yeah, so that's one thing to note. Getting things right doesn't mean you know them right? So that's an important thing. And for the RC, he asked me to go through, 2 articles of The Economist every single day. He charted out an entire, exercise as to what I'm supposed to do, not just read them, but like actively read the passage, understand why the author's written it, what are the assumptions, what is the theme of the passage. And that really amped up my ability to grasp the reading comprehension passages, because there's a similarity in the way the Economist or any leading good newspaper writes their articles and how they appear in the GMAT. So just getting yourself in the groove and like really being able to answer that. So yeah, that is how my study became very geared towards my weaknesses. And then I started taking the Sigma Mock X tests, and again, that was another ball game altogether, because then I started getting my scores, but I also started getting analytics. It and that's where it tells you how much time you're taking for every question, whether you're taking too long. It also tells you if you're taking very little time, which is great. I mean, it also flags questions when you're taking very little time, because it just wants to double check if you actually know what you're doing or you're just bluffing. So yeah, I mean, these things really help me, because especially like in SC, when I got to a point where I was comfortable, the Sigma Mock X kept telling me that, like, look, okay, you've reached your target, like you're good here, keep going, but you still need a little work, with the RC or stuff like that. So yeah, that's how this time's attempt was very different. Also, my mindset was very different. I was way more confident going into the test. I just knew that I'm going to like make it. Yeah.
So, given that you had that confidence this time that you know you're going to make it, that confidence must have been driven by something. What was that X factor now?
So yeah, I guess like I said, it was all about first of all, when you actually get better, when your ability improves. So I'll just give you a really small example. So for instance, in my first attempt, my RC was always kind of bad. Like, it was never up to the mark, and it was probably the reason why my verb used to always fluctuate, because
Hmm.
based on the type of passage, sometimes I used to really enjoy the passage. It used to, because I'm an engineer, if it was something to do with science or technology, I would just really understand it. But then if it if it had to do with humanities or politics, and that used to throw me off. So then, and that's what I felt like, even in the main test, like it depends on the passage, and if I get a good passage, I get a 750, 760. Otherwise, I don't, manage. But that's where things really change. When your ability actually improves, um, no matter what the passage is, you're going to be able to do it, because there's a set rule book, literally. I mean, I love the fact that it's actually verbal, but it's also actually quant. So I always tell people that SC is quant. If you know the rules, it's like it's just an equation. You put it all together, it's going to work. You'll get the right answer, right? So even for RC, surprisingly, there are a set there's a set pattern of how you should do things. And it's just about, if whatever the question asks you, if you can actually prove it with data from the passage, you're good to go. You that So just these small nuances which really make all that difference. And then no matter what passage comes your way, may it be something that you're comfortable with or you're uncomfortable with, you're going to be able to do it. So that kind of ability really amped up in my second attempt, and that started to show through in my scores as well. Like I consistently started getting better scores, and my ESRs from the Sigma MockX kept telling me the same thing. That okay, your SE is good, you've like your CR is good, like your RC just getting there, and that's when you know that you can replicate it. Because after all, the main test is just any other test. I mean, it's just like any other mock test that you give, right? So that's the kind of confidence that it gives you, like these analytics, really.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, and we're going to quickly go back to the PPT. I want to talk about this very interesting effect. It's called the Einstein-Long effect. I don't know if you've heard of it. Uh, this is essentially so. Firstly, have you heard of it?
No, actually, this is the first time I'm looking at this word, but yeah.
So essentially, this effect is when you've done a certain number of problems in a certain way, you start repeating a trend of how to solve them for future problems as well. That doesn't work for the GMAT. That's the problem, and that's how all humans function. So when you can kind of get out of this effect is when you become one of those creative thinkers to kind of find five different ways of solving the question. So essentially, for example, um, you solve an essay question, right? There's five options. Every option has two or three nuances. So that's 15, 20, 25 data points from every single question you do. You do 20 questions and you have enough data for about 300 questions. So you don't really have to do 300 questions to make sure that you get those repetitive patterns and see that math. So that's what the Einstein-Long effect is. And most students who don't do well on the GMAT usually have. And then that's one of the biggest things that, uh, there are three factors pretty much that tell you that something's not right. So when you're doing well, but you can't figure out, is this really it? So you'll do well on a mock and you won't do well on the next one. So there's no confidence there, and that's where the fluctuating mock scores come from. And you always be in this perpetual state of anxiety before the exam, right? And this may happen to good students as well, bad students as well. But you always get the feeling that I don't know how it's going to go. When you say that, that's when it's a problem. When you honestly say that I know how it's going to go, it's going to depend on my RC. I know how I can fix it. That's when you do well. So I think that's something you really need to control of. And here's what we're going to talk about now. This is the biggest thing that changed, right? It's all about the qualitative amount of studies that you're doing, and you did this really, really well. So take me through, for example, RCs. In RCs, what are the key things that you saw while you were reading passages from The Economist?
Right. So for RCs, um, I remember that in my first attempt, I used to read a passage, And despite the fact that a lot of people would tell you that you should make summaries, including the EGMAT platform, it tells you to make summaries of each of the paragraphs, so that you're not at loss when you go back or you look at a question, right? I didn't do that, and not because I'm like overconfident or not like that, but I guess that's how everybody also has to find a way that works for them. So, for instance, in my first attempt, I know that if I start scribbling, so I'm that kind of student. If you're teaching me something, I'll listen, because the moment I start writing, then I can't be doing the multitasking. Then I start getting very like, then I'll just lose you and I'll start writing. So it makes no sense for me. So I never did that, and it cost me a lot, because it's true. I mean, it's like a 400 word passage with a hell lot of a detail, and then you having to go back and wonder if those things were even mentioned, and then your brain starts like fooling you. Yeah, maybe it was there, or you get the gist of what I'm trying to say here. And that's when like in the second attempt, for instance, what I really did differently was I actually summarized the passage. So I reached a midway. Maybe I'm not the scribbler kinds, I can't write a lot. So I wrote like 10 words, or maybe 8 words, to summarize a passage. So that's what I did. But that really helps you, because then essentially your entire passage has shrunk to just about 4 lines, and you know exactly where to look for what. And another major thing, which okay, there are two more things that I'd really like to talk about. The first, I don't know who this is from, but I guess it was again just reading on the GMAT club. It's called the finger method, where you just keep all 5 fingers open at the beginning of your question, which they each signify one of the answer choices, and you keep closing them every time you've, marked something off your list. And that really made my life easier, because at the end, all I had to do was quickly look at my fingers and know that, okay, like this is the one remaining. Otherwise, sometimes you take that extra couple of seconds to also decide which one you'd ticked off. So, because it's a computerized test after all, you can't like do it on paper. So, yeah, that's one really important thing. And another last thing that really worked for me in RC was, can the passage prove it to you? So if it's asking you a question, maybe an inference question, maybe a detailed question is a little more easier to answer, I guess. But an inference question like used to really be my weakest point, because well, I guess we all know why an inference can be the weakest for somebody. So yeah, I mean, if the passage can really prove it to you, and it's not like something that you just feel, so yeah, that's something that really changed it for me completely. And that's why even topics that generally would make me uncomfortable, like for instance humanities, or something to do with American politics, where they have a lot of politics involved, and stuff like this, I started looking at it very differently. Like, okay, just skim out everything. I mean, make it crisp, uh, summarize it, and just ask yourself if the passage can prove this to you. So yeah, these things really worked for me in RC, for instance. So yeah.
I think the best students do. I think you can do it yourself. The best students really make sure they ask the question why. And I know that why is very, very important. And we just go back quickly into the PPT and talk a little bit about this why, because the why is what really matters, right? So the first is, did I know the concept that I'm applying? And did I know how to really approach the question, right? And the next part is, um, you know, the next part is, do I solve more questions? So, right, once you solve more questions, you check two things. One, you check whether the explanation is along the same lines as what you want it to be. And two, is there a better way? So the best students usually go on to really disprove what they believe. So this in itself, if you're going to solve more questions after just solving one, is not the right approach. If you can disprove your own approach and find a better one, is when you truly learn, and that's the power of why, right? So for example, in an SE question, if you can disprove why you've got the answer as D, and you keep asking yourself once, twice, thrice, you will definitely find the trap yourself. And I think That's what the best students do. They disprove themselves, and that's how they learn much faster than a guy who's solving thousands of questions and he's doing pretty much everything out there, right? So again, these are a few places that you guys can probably start reading articles. Nat Geo has really good stuff as well, and then that's something that you did. And I want to focus on the active reading bit as well. You made sure that you were comprehending while you were reading. A lot of people just don't really do that. Let's finally talk about the mocks now. There were three things in the mock that worked for you, and they were around the timing, right? So I remember the splits that you talked about. So let's just talk about the Sigma X mocks for a bit and how they bridge the gap of data for you to kind of make you confident for your next attempt where you got a 750.
Right. So, yeah, well, the Sigma MockX really helped me to understand, my ability in the true sense and in every sense. So they would give you a breakdown of the timing factor, which I believe is, of course, a very important factor. If you take 4 or 5 minutes to do a question, of course, you're lacking the ability. Even if you could do it right, you're lacking the ability because clearly, I think the GMAT is a beautiful test. I think it's very well crafted, and they're not there to, put you in a spot where you take 4 minutes to do a question. You just know you're doing something wrong. So yeah, that's one way that the mock tests help me. They really help me identify, like the Sigma mock X. They really help me identify in terms of pure timing, what my actual strengths are, and where I really need to buck up my ability in order to take lesser time. Another thing is they give you a section wise breakdown of even for instance in RC. It's not just going to tell you that your RC was like so and so question was you took too long or you got it wrong, but they're actually going to tell you that in RC specifically humanities is a problem that we see in in RC, or for that matter it could be something else for somebody else. So yeah, that's one way that it really helps you. So, and it gives you like a, another thing is it gives you like a section wise breakdown. So for instance, if I have put in if I have input a q like a v42 as my target score, then it tells you in which section you've actually hit the score, or maybe you've done even better. So like it'll tell you that okay, in SC you've nailed it, like you needn't bother, but then in some sections you need to do much better, or like a little better or much better to be able to hit that score. So I think um, a constant reminder or constant feedback really helps. So I think that's why the Sigma mock X are just great tests, because they, I mean, they do that extra analytics which doesn't come along with the official GMAT tests. So, and you can't even ask for, the worst part is it's not like you can just pay and get it too. You just don't have the option. So I guess this is a, it's a wonderful platform, and anybody who's using EGMAT should really yeah, should really make use of this now. Uh, just don't do what I did. So yeah.
Yeah, so you basically learned from your mistakes the first time around to leverage it the next time, but you fixed that. I mean, kudos to you. All points to you. So let's quickly go back to the PPT and just talk about these little nuances that you were talking about the mocks. Right?
Yeah.
The first part is you can just probably mute yourself. There's three parts, right? So you need to ask yourself three main questions. Why am I taking all the time that I'm actually taking on a certain question, whether it's SC, CR, or RC? And specifically with RCs, why am I taking all this time to read it? Am I just not understanding it, or do I need to go back and read it again? Or is it just that this material is not comfortable for me? There's certain questions that you take the right amount of time with. You want to make sure that you understand what those questions are, because you're going to leverage those questions to compensate for where you actually take time. The GMAT is not about perfect test taking. It's all about checks and balances. And this is where you're going to really shine. And then there are the questions where you actually take two less time. So these are the questions that you get right, but for the wrong reasons. Right. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that you would want to know. And like you said, I mean, obviously there's ESR plus analysis here. Now I want to explain each one of these styles to you. When you take a mock, what do you want to know? whether it's a Sigma X mock or a Fission mock or whatever. You want to know what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and how do I fix it? What is the fix? Can you please tell me? Like, can you show it to me? That's one thing that you want to know. The second thing is you want to know, is it timing that really is creating this non-performance issue? A lot of people say that I have a time management issue. It usually ends up being an ability issue in 90% of those cases. Timing issues can vary from slow starters to not letting go of questions, and these are things that are there with all students, right? So these are things you want to know, you want to see it in front of you, so you can gauge it and you can allow someone else to do it. And the GMAT is all about blocks. It's all about subsectional level ability blocks that adapt to each other. So here's a fun fact for a lot of people who don't know this. For example, if you get a bunch of questions in SC wrong towards the beginning, it's not like you're going to get a CR very, very easy question later. You're going to actually get easier SC questions in the next block. The CR questions are completely independent of that. So remember that it's a subsectional test, and a lot of people don't know this, by the way. A lot of people don't know this. But I mean, there's different blocks, and that's how they work, and that's how the GMAT works, right? So any final tips and advice that you want to share with everybody here, Roni? So I think a lot of people really want to know that there's a bunch of people who are working really like long hours. How can they really study and how can they practice? How do they divide that routine in the week according to you? You're the best judge because you're the one who's scored a 750.
Right. So, I guess I think we all started off with the point where you first need to really want it badly. I think that um, if if somebody like me can take time out for this, I guess most people who take this test can take out time for it. And so it's all about really understanding why you want to, take the GMAT, and what do you wish to get out of it. If it's compelling enough, you're going to be able to take time out. I guess, I mean, I can't, this is such a generic question and it's so specific also in a way to everybody, because everyone has different work commitments, different family commitments. So, see, of course, I think we all understand that. Um, so there's a really good quote, at the cost of sounding philosophical, but I read it at the time that I was actually studying for my GMAT, and sometimes I used to really feel guilty about putting work at the back foot, because I did have to do that sometimes. So I read a
Hmm.
quote somewhere which said that you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So I guess if you just accept that look, if you really want to ace this, you have to put it, you have to put it before everything else, because that's the only way you can ace it. That's just how it is. If you don't give it enough time and respect, it's probably not going to work out for you. So if you can put everything else at the back foot for some time, maybe work a little bit. Of course, I'm not asking you to totally like, but a little bit, like, don't take on that one extra commitment, or just because you want to get an MBA. And if you can skip a meeting with your friends. There were 5 months straight, I didn't have like one single late night, although that was kind of like the lifestyle I had. We used to go partying almost every weekend, but I had to cut back on that, because I knew that not just affects the evening study, but it also affects the next morning study. So you just have to put things behind. That's just how it is, because after all, we just have the same amount of time every day. You have to decide how to best use it. So yeah, it's just a sacrifice that you will have to do.
So it's all about that urgency matrix, simply.
Exactly. It's very
Got it.
simple, actually.
Got it. Devanshu has this question, Rohini. So he's saying that a lot of students actually, when they're doing a mock, they have that I am. You know? So just have a look at this question and see if you can best answer it.
Okay, so in terms of the time, I guess, Devanshu, the best way to work with this is, look, I'll be very honest. I've never had too much of a timing issue, um, but I guess from what I've heard from other people, and it feels I mean, I don't know, this may be redundant because you've read this a lot of places the way I have read it, is that people just set out time for an X number of questions. And if you're struggling with time, and if you hit that mark, then you just know that, okay, you just let go of the question. But if you ask specifically me, because of course this is, about me, so I will say that um, it's about improving your ability. I think once you improve your ability, because like I said, the GMAT is not out there to put you in a tough spot. They just want to test that one thing, and that one thing is going to, you can do it in 2 minutes. Trust me, you can. So if you just improve your ability to do it in 2 minutes, you will not have to look at that clock. And just don't look at it. Just focus on improving your ability. You will not ever have to look at the clock. That's at least what I never had to look at the clock, honestly. So yeah, I hope that helps. And I don't know.
I
But
just
yeah,
have
that's
something
how.
to add here. I just have something to add here. Demansh, just answering this question for you as well. The most important thing when you try to solve questions within a time format is having a mental sort of timing matrix, right? For example, let me give you a very, very clear cut thing. In SC, if you go through the question, if you understand what the errors are, you go through the options and you can figure out which one to negate, you have a very clear cut path, right? So you know you're gonna take about 80 to 90 seconds always for that. That's a given. What happens when you get stuck on an option? What happens when you have to go back and read the question again? What happens when you do back and forth? That's when you realize in your mental time matrix that I am taking longer and I maybe should just let go of this and move on. And the same thing really applies to CR and RC and a quant question as well. Know when to cut the cord. That's very, very important. And a good test taker really understands you. It's very important to understand when to let go of questions on the test. Fair enough. Rohini, one last question for you, right? So there are a bunch of things that you took away from your first journey and a bunch of things that you took away from your second journey. Could you just like summarize what are the highlights of both and what really works for everyone out there?
Okay, so I guess the first one was, I believe, a structured approach, because I've seen I've come across a ton of people who, and especially because I'm an engineer, it's birds of a feather flock together. You know how it goes. All my friends are also engineers and work with engineers, and so a lot of them take the GMAT, and engineers feel that maths is just their thing, and they don't really need help. And how difficult can verbal get? And so basically, what happens is a lot of them believe that just by looking at OG questions, just by doing some Manhattan Guide questions, they'll be able to crack the GMAT. And I guess kudos to anybody who probably is looking out for a score which is in maybe late 600s or maybe just about 700. I think that's doable. Maybe that's doable. But what I actually really am happy about the fact that I decided to, in spite of the fact that maths is also kind of like sweet to me. I mean, it's a little easier for me, but in spite of that, I decided to go in for a structured approach. I actually decided to get the EGMAT module, because I think it's a very good investment of money. It You don't have to go anywhere. It's at your fingertips. It's a very structured thing. It gives you questions, all of that. So I think in my first attempt, I would say something that I would really like to advise people is take that time to do it in a structured manner. That'll really help. It'll cut out a lot of that extra time that you invest in trying to understand the syllabus or what kind of questions come along. So just cut that and focus your time on the right things. So I guess first attempt, what else would I like to talk about? Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, that there's one more thing which I think I took away from my first, and which really helped me in my second is I kept hearing, so of course I used to also look at YouTube videos here and there while I was studying for my first attempt, and I did come across somebody who said that if you have whatever your target score may be, make sure that you're getting that score consistently for at least 2 to 3 times before you go in for the test, because until you don't get that score, in your mocks, don't expect that you'll get that score on your main test. And in spite of the fact that I had seen this video and it really struck a chord with me, but in spite of that, I went against it, and I was determined that I would disprove this. But sadly, it's the truth. If I wasn't getting 750, I never got a 750 in my mocks. I always got anywhere between a 700 to 740, and that's exactly where I landed up. I got a 710 in my first attempt, right? But in my second attempt, all the Sigma mock X tests were much better. The last mock test, the official test that I left behind for the for the second attempt,
Yeah.
I got a 770. Okay, and I had and I mean, I just knew. So that's when I knew that I'm going to do well, in my actual test. Like nothing can really take me, or like completely throw me off track. So I guess that's a highlight from my first couple of highlights from my first attempt. And of course, the second attempt was all about. Okay, so one is, yes, error logs is something that I really started paying attention to in the second attempt. Because I think I finally started wanting to do better at the nuances. I knew that I had managed to get the bulk right. Now I just had to keep, slicing and chopping and understanding the nuances. And that's when I really started giving more time to the error logs. I think that really, really helps. And I would say your error log should be small, as small as possible, because if your error log is like, 5 pages long, you are likely not to go through it. So just try to get the errors sliced off and make it smaller with time. And of course, analytics. So guys, I don't know how else one can do this, but I was I took the EGMAT course and I did the Sigma mock X, and they really, really helped me. If there are other tests out there that help you similarly, well, great. But I think this is something that really helps if you are in a position like mine where you don't know what's going wrong. You don't know how to get that score. So yeah, I guess.
Perfect. So this is cherry on the pudding over here. So, Roni, we are actually launching Skull 2.0 tomorrow, and talking about slicing and dicing. Now, this is a platform that is literally going to take whatever data you have and is going to throw it in your face and tell you this is how you're going to improve. And I mean, I have never been more excited about anything else. And the same thing is with
So
Russia.
excited.
Skull has been one of our
Officers from some of the
favorite
world's top
platforms. And then, frankly, this is something that we've been waiting for a very, very long time. So I would request you and probably everybody who's here to come watch that launch, because everything that you saw, the strategy advice and everything, all of that brain power has been put together there. So you can imagine how good it's going to be. Anyways, I just want to talk about that. Thank you so much for coming on board for this session. It was a pleasure, it really was.
It was my pleasure as well. In fact, I'm happy to help anybody who's struggling with this. And yeah.
Thank you so much again. Yeah, thanks.
top business schools.
We at HBS have been around for over 100 years, and many things have changed, but one thing has remained the same, and that is we educate leaders who make a difference in the world.
Morning, afternoon, evening, from whatever part of the world you are joining from. Hello, GMAT community.
It's about curiosity is how I've seen it, is you have all these opportunities and different viewpoints and perspectives that come with the MBA program, not only from professors and faculty, but also from classmates as well, because we all have experience that we're coming with.
I think the virtual recruitment experience has really expanded some of these possibilities. We're going to have even more recruiters kind of connected to our community, maybe than we had previously.
Good luck. It's going to be great. The MBA is such a fantastic experience. Choose the school that's the best fit for you, but also you want to be joining a community that you're proud to be part of. Good luck with your search, and we hope to talk to you soon.